1. The mansion on Briar Ridge. When I inherited the mansion on Briar Ridge from my eccentric great-uncle Harold, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. The place was massive. Its Gothic spires piercing the overcast sky. And it was surrounded by a forest so dense it seemed alive. Growing up, we'd heard rumors about Harold's mansion, the screams heard at night, the lights that flickered on despite the electricity being shut off for decades, and the strange accidents that befell anyone who ventured too close. I didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but standing at the wrought iron gates for the first time, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold October air. The lawyer who handed me the keys warned me about the unusual upkeep needs of the property but refused to elaborate. I had no idea what he meant until the first night. The house was eerily quiet when I stepped inside, its grand hall illuminated by the faint glow of a stained glass window depicting strange, eldritch symbols. Dust motes swirled in the air, and the smell of mildew mixed with something metallic I couldn't place. I spent the day exploring the house, finding rooms filled with antique furniture, faded photographs of my ancestors, and bookshelves lined with tomes and languages I didn't recognize. By nightfall, I felt drained but fascinated. That's when the whispering started. It began as a faint murmur, almost like the wind. But as the hours dragged on, it grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just one voice. It was many dozens, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable: anger, desperation, and hunger. I didn't sleep that night. 2. The first visitor. Next morning, I decided to explore the basement. I'd found a set of old keys in the study, and one of them fit the padlock on the basement door. The air grew colder as I descended the stone steps, the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the narrow space. The basement was massive, with arched ceilings that made it feel more like a crypt than a storage space. Strange symbols, similar to those on the stained glass window, were carved into the walls. I found what looked like a diary on a small table near the far wall. It belonged to Harold. Most of the entries were incomprehensible, filled with strange symbols and drawings, but one passage stood out: underscore the gate must remain sealed. They hunger. They always hunger. Before I could process what that meant, I heard the sound of footsteps above me. Someone was in the house. Racing upstairs, I found a man standing in the grand hall. He was tall and gaunt, with deep-set eyes and a weathered face. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a black-and-white photograph. "You shouldn't have opened the basement," he said, his voice a low growl. Before I could respond, he vanished, leaving behind only the faint smell of sulfur. 3. The shadows moveth at night. I heard the whispers again, louder this time. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, seeping into my thoughts. I tried to ignore them, but sleep was impossible. Around midnight, I noticed something moving in the corner of my bedroom. A shadow, darker than the room around it, shifted unnaturally. It was humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. As I stared, frozen in terror, it moved closer, the air around it growing colder with every step. I grabbed the nearest object, a brass candlestick, and swung. It passed through the shadow as if it weren't there, but the creature stopped and seemed to retreat into the corner, melting into the darkness. I left the room and spent the rest of the night in the library, surrounded by the faint smell of old paper and ink. 4. The housekeeper. Next day, a woman arrived at the mansion unannounced. She introduced herself as Eleanor, the housekeeper. I hadn't hired her, but she insisted that she had worked for my uncle for years and that she knew how to keep the house safe. Safe from what? I asked. She looked at me with pity. "You'll see soon enough." Eleanor was a stern woman in her 60s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude. She moved through the house with purpose, muttering prayers under her breath and sprinkling salt in the doorways. When I asked her about the shadows, she stiffened. "They're just the beginning," she said. "If the gate opens fully, the house won't be the only thing they consume." She refused to say more but left me with a list of instructions: keep the basement locked, never leave mirrors uncovered, and never under any circumstances open the attic. 5. The mirror secretary didn't want to believe Eleanor, but the whispers, the shadows, and the diary's cryptic warnings made it hard to dismiss her. That night, I noticed one of the mirrors in the upstairs hallway was uncovered. Its surface was dark, almost like it was filled with smoke. As I approached, the reflection shifted. Instead of seeing myself, I saw the grand hall, filled with figures cloaked in darkness. They stood motionless, their heads tilted toward the mirror as if they could see me. One of them raised a hand and pointed. I ran. 6. The attic, despite Eleanor's warnings. I couldn't resist the pull of the attic. The door was padlocked, but one of the old keys I'd found fit perfectly. The air grew colder as I climbed the narrow staircase, and the smell of rot grew stronger. The attic was filled with strange artifacts, masks, statues, and jars filled with unidentifiable substances. At the center of the room was a large, circular sigil carved into the floor. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Before I could investigate further, the floorboards creaked, and I turned to see Eleanor standing in the doorway. "You've doomed us all," she said. 7. The gate opens. Next few days were a blur of chaos. The whispers became screams, the shadows grew bolder, and the house itself seemed to twist and change. Rooms shifted, hallways stretched, and doors led to places they shouldn't. Eleanor tried to perform some kind of ritual to seal the gate, but it was too late. The sigil in the attic flared to life, and the entire house shook. From the basement, I heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. 8. The final night. In the final night, the shadows came for us. Eleanor was the first to go. Dragged into the darkness despite her prayers and wards, I fought to escape, but the house wouldn't let me. The front door was gone, replaced by a solid wall, and the windows showed nothing but endless darkness. In the end, I found myself back in the attic, standing before the glowing sigil. The growling from below grew louder, and the shadows surrounded me. I don't remember what happened next, only that I woke up outside the gates, the mansion gone, and the forest eerily silent. 9. The aftermath. It's been a year since that night. The mansion never reappeared, but I've been haunted by nightmares and strange occurrences. Mirrors crack when I walk by, shadows linger too long, and the whispers follow me wherever I go. I've spent countless hours researching the symbols and artifacts I saw in the house, but the answers only lead to more questions. All I know is that something ancient and hungry was unleashed that night, and it's still out there, waiting. 10. The survivors. A few months ago, I met someone else who had encountered the mansion. Her name was Dr. Karen Price, a historian specializing in occult artifacts. She had been researching the Briar Ridge estate for years, and when I showed her the symbols I had seen, her face went pale. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she asked. Karen explained that the mansion was a nexus, a place where the barrier between worlds was thin. She believed the sigil in the attic was a seal, meant to keep something unspeakable trapped. But once the seal is broken, she said, it can never be fully restored. She gave me a journal filled with notes on similar occurrences throughout history. Most ended in catastrophe. 11. The haunting spread. Since meeting Karen, I've started noticing patterns. The shadows aren't confined to me anymore. People I meet report strange happenings, lights flickering, cold spots, and voices in the night. It's as if the mansion's curse is spreading, infecting anyone who comes into contact with me. Karen and I have tried to piece together a solution, but every attempt leads to dead ends. The shadows grow bolder, and the whispers louder. Sometimes, I wake to find symbols carved into the walls of my apartment, ones I know I didn't make. 12. The final stand. Karen and I agreed that the only way to stop this was to return to Briar Ridge. If the mansion had disappeared, we'd find the spot where it stood. Armed with salt, iron, and ancient rituals from Karen's journal, we ventured into the forest. We found the clearing, but it wasn't empty. The mansion had returned, its windows glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The air was thick with the scent of rot and sulfur. Inside, the house was alive with shadows. The sigil in the attic pulsed violently, cracks spreading across its surface. Karen began the ritual, chanting words in a language I didn't recognize. The shadows fought back, their forms clawing at us with icy fingers. In the end, Karen managed to seal the sigil, but at a great cost. The shadows consumed her, leaving nothing behind but her journal. The mansion began to collapse, the walls folding in on themselves like paper. I barely escaped, the journal clutched tightly in my hands. 13. The legacy. Now, I am alone again, burdened with the knowledge of what we unleashed and what Karen sacrificed to contain it. The journal is my only guide, filled with warnings and incomplete rituals. I know the seal won't hold forever. The mansion may be gone, but the shadows remain, watching, waiting. If you ever find yourself near Briar Ridge, turn back. Some places are cursed, and some legacies are better left buried. 14. The endless vigil shadows have grown restless. They are no longer confined to my nightmares or fleeting moments in the corner of my hey. Follow me openly now, there. Forms just visible at the edge of the streetlights, their whispers audible even in crowded rooms. I've tried warning people, but the curse spreads faster than I can contain it. Karen's journal holds fragments of rituals that might work, rituals that involve binding the shadows to a new nexus. But the cost is unimaginable. Each binding requires a soul as a tether. I know what this means. The only way to end the curse is to become the seal myself. 15. The final sacrifice. I returned to Briar Ridge one last time. The mansion wasn't there, but the clearing felt alive, pulsing with dark energy. The sigil reappeared as I stepped into the center, the symbols etched into the ground glowing faintly. I read the final passage in Karen's journal, the words foreign and heavy on my tongue. Shadows descended upon me, their forms writhing and merging into a vortex of darkness. I could feel their hunger, their endless need for a host. As I chanted the last phrase, the vortex collapsed into the sigil, and I felt the world go silent. I am the seal now, bound to the nexus. The shadows cannot leave, but neither can I. If you find this story, heed my warning. Do not approach Briar Ridge. The forest may seem empty, but it watches. The shadows are patient, and they will wait for you. 16. The forgotten recordsments. After becoming the seal, fragments of my consciousness remain tethered to reality. In rare moments of lucidity, I discovered that the mansion wasn't truly gone. It had merely shifted planes. Karen's journal hinted at dimensions layered over our own, where the mansion served as a bridge between worlds. Occasionally, wanderers stumble into Briar Ridge, lured by whispers or driven by curiosity. The shadows feast on them, growing stronger, their forms more defined. I can feel their hunger, their delight in tormenting those who stray too close. My screams join the cacophony, warning them to leave, but they never listen. One day, a group of paranormal investigators arrived, equipped with cameras and devices they barely understood. They were drawn to the clearing, their bravado masking fear. I watched helplessly as the sigil flared, the shadows erupting to claim them. One of the investigators dropped a recorder, its red light blinking before the darkness consumed him. That recorder now lies at the edge of the clearing, a warning left for those who might follow. 17. The shattered seal. Time is meaningless in the nexus, but I know the seal is failing. The sigil's glow dims, and cracks spread like veins through its surface. The shadows test its boundaries, pushing against me with increasing force. Each soul they devour strengthens them, and my tether weakens. In desperation, I reached out through the void, searching for someone who could finish what Karen and I started. I found you. If you're reading this, you've already felt the pull of Briar Ridge. The shadows know you now, and they will not stop. Karen's journal holds the key, but its instructions are incomplete. You'll need to discover the rest on your own. Return to the clearing, face the sigil, and finish the binding ritual. But be warned, the cost is unimaginable. Will you have the strength to make the sacrifice? 18. The endless watchy remain here, the shadows clawing at my mind, their whispers a constant reminder of my failure. They are patient, waiting for the seal to shatter completely. And when it does, they will pour into the world, unstoppable and insatiable. If you choose to ignore this warning, know that you will not be the first to fall. The shadows will claim you, just as they claimed me. But if you find the courage to stand against them, you might succeed where I failed. The fate of countless souls depends on your choice. Do not come to Briar Ridge unless you are prepared to face the darkness within yourself. The mansion watches, the forest breathes, and the shadows wait. This is your warning, and perhaps your destiny.